we practice and apply the expertise and capability? Once we had that foundation built for what the enterprise effort looked like, then we began to integrate change management into not just CSI planning and execution, which was that most important project, but also how do we build more knowledge and ability for change across our organization. And then our anticipation is in the future, we will begin to really think about change management capabilities as a core competency for not just certain people in the organization who have been a part of that strong learning process, but actually building it into everything we do and into our culture. Next slide, please. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here are some of the things that I think have been really good in terms of our approach to change management. First of all, we agreed on the methodology. I think agreeing on that single methodology and then reinforcing those concepts, training early certain people who are going to be early adopters is really important. We also began aligning it with our core values. So in our performance planning process, we actually tie competencies to the core values for each team member. And we ask them to be thinking about change as part of how we show up with our core values. I've learned that I have to be not only the CEO, but the CRO. It is important for me to understand my role as a chief reinforcement officer for the why of why we're doing this, and then also helping to manage resistance. And that starts at the top, including my own resistance at times. And then also visible messaging, right? We have all team meetings now because of COVID. We actually have them almost every 3 weeks where we're focused on a particular topic. And we try to build change into that mostly through those questions, right? Why, what is changing? What's not changing? Why are we changing now? What happens if we don't change? We use that framework in a lot of the ways that we launch new projects. And then during COVID-19, because we actually identified COVID-19 as a project that needed a change practitioner. You can imagine the amount of change everyone was going through with COVID. And then we were allowing some people to come back into the office. We had to establish protocols and getting our teammates to tell us whether they understood the whys around the change, why we were coming back into the office or why we weren't, were all really important messaging for us during the pandemic. So that's the good. Let's move on to the bad. Enterprise change management, by definition, is happening at a higher level inside your organization. So the reality is, until leadership at the top is engaged in understanding the reason why we need an ECM framework, is key. If they're not engaged in it, it is going to very quickly fizzle out as it goes down. I'm writing a series of articles right now as part of a thought leadership series. And one of them is managers are people too. That's the headline of the article. And what I mean by that is we sometimes forget that whether it's senior leaders or managers, that they are in fact having to understand the why of the change. But we, as a CEO, I sort of assume I don't have to tell my leaders over and over again. They'll get it. They know what we're doing. They know why we're doing. We just need to get it done. It's the change at the bottom that we need to work on, but that is just the opposite of what's real, what's true. So when I forget that my senior leaders are people too, that's when I forget to recognize resistance. And also senior leaders are the ones that set the example. So you cannot, as a CEO or as the director of several managers, you cannot assume that your leaders are automatically on board. In fact, their resistance is a gift, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. When CEOs lose sight of the fact that ECM is important and they have to act in a change practitioner role to manage change across an organization, that's when things will get off the rails. And I don't know if you've ever heard the shadow of a leader concept, but it's a little bit like playing the Simon Says game. And I wasn't going to do this, but I'm just going to go ahead and have some fun with this. It might not work on the video, Debbie, but you'll humor me for a minute. So everyone put up their right hand. me see the right hand. I see a few, so that's good enough. Now circle your right hand. Circle it around and around and around and around and around and around. And now I want you, while you're keeping that hand moving, don't stop, don't stop. Take your left hand and touch your nose. So most of you did it. If I was in a room with you, some of you would have touched your head, which is what I did, but I said nose. And so what is the moral of the story, right? If I say, touch your nose, but you do what I do, not what I say, you understand the power of a leader's actions on everyone under them, right? If you have a leader who runs tight, efficient meetings, everyone under him will likely run tight, efficient meetings. If you have a leader who runs over every time you have a meeting, you will likely have leaders that run over on their meetings, right? It's that shadow of a leader that cascades down through the organization, both for the good and for the bad. So it's just an important thing for if you're a change practitioner and you're coaching a CEO or you're coaching a leader, remember to help them understand people look at you and they watch your words and your actions. And I just think that's so important for leaders to understand. Next slide, please. Let's get to the ugly and then we'll open it up for some questions, which I think is where the richness oftentimes lives. ECM is a constant engagement effort. It doesn't really stop. I'd like it to on some days. I'd really like to not have to do all this reinforcement stuff. Couldn't we just play Jean-Luc Picard and say, make it so, and it will happen? But that is not the reality of change. And in times of constant change saturation, which certainly has happened to all of us because of COVID, I think it's about really making enterprise change management relevant. How is it relevant in our decision making? How is it relevant in how we communicate? How is it relevant in managing resistance? We had a speaker come in the other day and talk to us about engagement, and he was terrific. And what he shared with us is that momentum, right? Momentum in a project, momentum in any kind of effort is not binary. Now, this is not ProSci material, so I will give credit to Rob Tordova, who brought this concept to us, but I really liked it. And I'm not a physics major, and I'm not really good at math because I actually believe 1 + 1 should and can equal 3. But in physics, as I understand it, momentum is defined as mass times velocity, right? But in change management, momentum is really defined as resources plus speed plus direction. If you don't have the resources, you're not going to build momentum. If you don't have the speed, which is getting everybody working on that change at the right time and the right pace, you don't get that momentum. And then clearly that direction of where we're going, why we're going there, what we're trying to achieve is so important. And I've really been thinking about ECM through that lens. Do I have the resources at Delta Dental committed to the enterprise change management effort? And some of those resources actually got redeployed to COVID, and COVID was a higher priority. So we have in some ways had to back off a little bit of our resources for change management at the enterprise level. The speed is important. Are we able to give it that effort every day, and is everybody on board? And then have I been very, very clear in why we need ECM and what's the direction we're going in for the future growth and success of Delta Dental? We also learned, because I don't know about you, but we've onboarded a few new people, hired them virtually, onboarded them virtually, training them virtually. You can do it. It's not ideal, but you can do it. But we have to make sure we have a plan for all new team members to learn about ProSci, learn about ADKAR, understand the Clark method if they're a manager. And then I think the most important thing for me is we are moving really fast at Delta Dental, and sometimes we just need to take a break and step back and slow down to speed up, because mistakes happen when we're going too fast. And in our change management work right now, I think it's okay to just simply say, where do we need to focus? What do we need to stop? And what do we need to keep putting emphasis on so we achieve that momentum we want for the purpose of our 4 key projects? Next slide. Okay, so just a couple tips, tricks, tips, tricks, and traps for all of you. I think it's important to plan your interventions. Let's just assume there's going to be relapse. So plan your interventions with your leaders, whether it's a boot camp for your senior leadership team, which we did, or some activation training, a little bit of a booster shot around change methodology. And then regular senior team meetings. I asked my change sponsor to bring me some things that I can use or just reminders. It's important for me as the CEO as well to be asking the right questions and to be able to identify resistance when I see it. Connect your change to your core values. For Delta Dental of Colorado, we have 2 values that I think really illustrate change management, and that is grow through learning and make tomorrow better than today. Everything we're doing in change management is about continuous improvement, and it's about growth. Also, resistance is a sign of progress. Now, I'm not sure this is true if you're raising a 2-year-old, but it probably is. Resistance is inevitable too. You're going to get it. Think of it as a gift. Think of it as a sign of project, but don't get stuck there. Move past it with all the tools that you need to address resistance. Connect sponsorship role to leadership responsibilities. So make it tangible. In my performance reviews for all of my senior leaders, there is a dimension of their performance review that is based on the project that they're sponsoring and how are they showing up as a sponsor, as opposed to just saying, well, they just aren't getting it done fast enough, because telling people to do something will not make it so. Getting them to understand the reason why they need to do it is what will make meaningful change. And then use change management responsibly. You cannot apply it to every project. We've identified the 4, I think now 5 projects that are like, this is where we're gonna put our change practitioners. This is where we're gonna emphasize change. This is where we're gonna talk about change through the lens of the ProSci methodology. And so we really try to focus on what can I do with 20% of the resources to get 80% of the impact. And then also know that it's easy to get distracted. Assuming folks have their marching orders, especially when you're a CEO, is really a trap that you can get stuck in, because in reality, everyone needs a lot of reinforcement. I need a lot of reinforcement when I'm trying to make a personal change, and I have to build that reinforcement and that coalition either with my spouse or my child or my friends or my colleagues. And so just recognizing that saying it, you want it so does not make it so.
Hi, Helen, can I interject here?
Yes.
We have a question from Kurt Wolf, and it is, in my 25 years in and around the change management space, I've seen few C-level executives speak so eloquently on change management. Thank you. So that's not the question. How did you pick up on both the knowledge and the passion for this particular capability? I imagine there's a good story or 2 there.
So I think the story, the first story is I'm a CEO with a bachelor's degree in sociology that I got in 1985 that would not have bought me a cup of coffee with $1 in my pocket when coffee was only $1. I started out getting my degree in physics. I was actually going to be an engineer, and discovered about 10 weeks in to my college degree with my dream of becoming an engineer that I was not studying my physics book or my calculus, and I was head down and absorbed in my sociology and psychology work. And I realized something, which is you should follow your passion, which was not physics and engineering, but rather the art of getting groups of people to do things together for the collective good. So my degree in sociology, I think in many ways grounds me in this notion that people, at the end of the day, are what get things done. And my belief, because I also wasn't all that good at math apparently, because I really do believe that 1 + 1 can and should equal 3, because we need things to be greater than the sum of the parts, right? I will take a highly effective team of people committed to team and mission and end results and goals over 6 really brilliant individual contributors. I will take the team with maybe a mediocre IQ, but a real commitment to rolling up their sleeves and getting the work done. And I think in large part, that's why I speak so eloquently about change management, because I really understand the value of individual psychology and the group sociology impact of taking care of the collective.
Great answer. We have another for you. This is from Scott Lyons. It has been my experience that some portion of perceived resistance within an organization is actually ambivalence. Can you share from your experience how you addressed ambivalence to the change at the senior leadership level and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's a great observation. Is it ambivalence or is it resistance? And clearly you have to probe to find out which it is. There have to be some group norms, I think, at the leadership level around decision making, which is related oftentimes to resource allocation. If someone is ambivalent about it, that's fine. I want to know that so I can understand why they're ambivalent, but then it might just be, well, we need to do this. Here's why we're doing it, and I need you on board. That's the part about don't get stuck in resistance, managing it continually. Know when you have to cut and run, or whether you have to stick with that issue because it really is a critical issue and the resistance is telling you something that you're missing. The one thing I didn't talk about in the presentation is, and I didn't realize this phenomenon actually existed until I became a CEO, and that is people want to tell the CEO what they think they want her to, what she wants to hear. That is the kiss of death for any CEO who's trying to manage change, if people are just giving her or him lip service. So I think it's a matter of knowing whether it's ambivalence or really a problem with the issue. We do something called Fist to Five in my SLT when we're debating and debating and debating. It's like, okay, here's where we're at, it's time to vote. And it's fist, I cannot live with this, or 5, I'm all in, or anything in between. Now, if you're gonna do 1, you have to do this finger, not the other finger. But we will do Fist to 5 a lot. And if I get all fists, even if I get 1 fist, I will usually go back and find out why. But if I get a 2 and a 4 and a bunch of 5s, I'm good. I know who's giving me a 2. I might ask them why, but then we make a decision and move forward.
That's awesome. I like that. The one I've seen is secret ballot, where you grab your thumbs and everybody votes. It's either thumbs up, thumbs down, but then you can kind of, anyway. We have a couple more questions for you. This is from Kenneth Lewis. Do you set a clock for how long resistors need to get on board or get out?
I don't, because I leave that really up to the individual manager. I think the most important thing to do with the manager is set the clock on their activation with that team member. It isn't to me as much about the team member resisting and how long you let them resist. The issue is, when does the manager sit down and say, okay, we're going to have the conversation? Because resistance is very frustrating to leaders, as we all know. And sometimes when I am most frustrated with the resistance, I have to look in the mirror and say, have you done the Clark model? Have you really sat down and gone through the awareness and the desire? Now, if the leader is doing everything they need to do as a leader to manage the resistance, then it's up to them to say it's up or out. At some point, you have to get on board. But at a minimum, you should understand what the resistance is, because there's truth and knowledge in the resistance that we can oftentimes miss because we're just frustrated that they won't just do what we tell them.
Completely agree. Here's a couple more questions. This one's from me. What does ECM look like at Delta Dental in terms of like org structure, roles, methodology framework, which you've mentioned a couple assessments, or whatever else you want to share about that?
So ECM at Delta Dental of Colorado looks like a project team made up of my director of HR, who is the basically the project manager of ECM. I am her sponsor, and the senior leadership team is really the coalition that she works with around how we apply change within the tenets of Delta Dental. We've then, with our big system project, we've actually identified 5 key sponsors of sub projects because, and I became more of the executive sponsor for the whole project. But if it's group administration and anything related to how we're going to use the system to load groups and handle file feeds, I have a SLT member who is a sponsor of that, and then a sponsor of member experience. So we've kind of created some functional sponsor roles, but now we're also doing some very creative things where, from a user acceptance team perspective, we're bringing 2 teams together to test jointly so that claims and member services are talking about the interplay of the claims testing versus the member experience testing. And then we have a group of change, we call them change champions, that we've assigned to specific projects, those big 5 projects. And that group of change practitioners or change champions reports directly to, on a dotted line basis, to our overall project manager for ECM. So it's very matrixed.
Yep. Sounds familiar. That's awesome. And by the way, Scott Lyons says, I love the Fist of 5 concept and I'm ready to put it in practice.
It's super simple. So you got to follow the KISS rule. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
If you're making some of your decision making complex, you'll get bogged down.
Yeah. Here's another question for you from Alan Paolini. At what point does change adaptability become a core foundational skill or expectation of every employee, like customer service or team collaboration? And how does it change the role or function of an ECM?
It's a great question. I would say we are not at a maturity point yet where I feel like if I walked around the building and asked every team member, how do we do change at Delta Dental, I would not get a consistent answer. So I think we're still working on the booster shot immunization of how we do change at Delta Dental. I would like to believe that when we're through this sort of massive change effort on all these different projects, we'll begin to see change show up in our culture, that people are like, this is how we do change, and be able to say, you know what, I'm frustrated with this, but it's okay. I'm going to look in the mirror. I'm going to take out my ADKAR model and I'm going to figure out how I can get on board so that we can see the velocity of change as a cultural component. And I don't think we're there yet, but I do hope we'll get there. The key is to make sure you have enough people with the knowledge and you're onboarding the new people into the new methodology and giving them time to learn it. I realized when I had 2 SLT members turn over in the last 2 years that I had to step back and realize I've got to train Brad and Adib on change management because we've all had the boot camp and now I'm bringing on 2 new people and I have to give them time to be a part of what we already know. I can't just assume you'll take the binder, take it home, learn it, and you'll be good. Okay, let's keep going. You've got to slow down to speed up.
Yeah. And I love the metaphor of looking in the mirror because that's a big part of all of this. Another question from Aaron Butler. Firstly, great to see you again.
Great to see you, Aaron.
Do you have any lessons learned for change that impacts adjacent stakeholders? For example, brokers or general agents in the payer ecosystem.
That's brilliant. So no, but it is a great question. And actually, we talked about this with value-based care. So I don't know if I have any dental professionals in the audience, but value-based compensation is a term in the medical world, right? And we've been talking about value-based care and compensation from a quadruple aim perspective, right? How do you increase quality, decrease price, improve patient satisfaction, and take care of the caregiver, which is the 4th part of the quadruple aim. It used to be triple aim, now it's quadruple aim. Providers are key to us putting a value-based care and compensation program, in terms of the way we compensate our dentist providers. And one of the questions that my chief dental officer asked me is, there's a big change related to moving to a pay-for-performance system or a value-based system to try to improve or change behaviors that optimize the care experience. And what Brad asked me was, how do we get our dentists to understand change methodology? Like, how do I create the awareness and desire of the providers to change behavior? Same for brokers. The new system we're going through has what we call a quote to contract provision, where literally from the broker quote all the way through the issuance of the ID card, we want to make that seamless and automated and not redundant, but we need the broker to change a behavior to get that project to work. And I have been thinking about, how do you create, besides incentives, you can do carrots or sticks or what I like to call velvet hammers or frozen carrots to get people to move their behavior. And by the way, you can borrow frozen carrots because that's not mine. That was the benefits manager at Comcast who created that within their benefits program. He wanted carrots, but he actually wanted frozen carrots to get people to do the right thing. I think this concept of finding a way to help your stakeholders understand change without investing in making them go through boot camp is going to be a differentiator if we can figure out an easy, effective way to do it. But I don't have all the answers on that yet.
Good answer. It's not always easy, simple. We have more questions for you. Jim Brown asks, do you use traditional project managers, e.g., for example, PMPs, certified? If so, any advice regarding integrating change managers / change management into the project planning process?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I am not a certified project manager, but one of my jobs in my many diverse background of my career was I was the Y2K program manager at a large insurance company. And so I have had a lot of project managers work for me. I think good project managers really intuitively understand the importance of change management. But I think it's critical that your project managers all have this foundation of change management in their domain, in their arsenal. It's got to be in their toolkit. But I also think that there's this change practitioner role of people on your team who are not project managers, who are just as, it's just as effective. So I think Andrea Miller is on the call with us today, and she's a change practitioner or a change champion for Delta Dental of Colorado. She is not officially a project manager, but I would argue her work as our corporate social responsibility manager is by design a project management type of a role. She's managing lots of little mini projects. But we partnered Andrea as the change champion with our certified project management leader who helps lead and manages our other two project managers. Remember, I'm a small company. I only have 200 employees, maybe a medium-sized company. That partnership for the move into the building behind me has been exceptional. The partnership is really good between Brent, the PMP, and Andrea, the change champion. So they work really well together. But they both are using the same language. They're both following the same methodology. And I think that's been a big part of it. So I think the key is, again, if you have a project manager who's resisting becoming a change practitioner, you'd really have to understand why they don't see that becoming a change practitioner will allow them to make all of their projects easier, right? I use Debbie's analogy of change is the water at the water park, right? I love that analogy. It just makes everything easier. And if you've ever gone down a water slide and they didn't have enough water, it was not a fun experience. And you get down a lot faster with the water. So I just think that you can meld those two, but they don't have to be one and the same. You can have managers in the business who are good change practitioners, and you can have project managers in your program office who are also learned in change discipline, but they're managing a project.
Good answer. Yeah, especially for bigger projects. There's a lot of work to be done. Lori Powell, none other than, asks, What keeps you up at night besides COVID-19?
My favorite line is, I sleep like a baby. I wake up every couple of hours screaming and hungry for something to eat. What keeps me up at night? Oh, a lot of things. I would say that what keeps me up at night is how do I prioritize to make sure I'm giving the right clear direction on the things that are the most important? Am I doing everything I can to minimize the change to the 20% that will have the 80% impact? Because the reality of both COVID in our workplace and just how fast organizations are moving and how much competitive threats are coming at us is we have to prioritize, but we also have to create a change resistant culture so that people understand that it's okay to pivot. It's okay to put something on pause and pick up something else because it's now critical. You don't want people to be constantly changing priorities, but the reality is we're going to move into a new building. We're come heck or high water, we have to be out of this building by October 31st. And we have to move into that new building. And we have to continue to manage COVID and what it brings. And CSI still has to be on the, full steam ahead. Sometimes team members are like, it's too much, we need to slow down. We can't always stop things from happening, but we can give you the ability to focus on the things that are most important. So I think what keeps me up most at night is just how do we get it all done and how do we make sure we're really focusing on the right things?
Good answer. Staying engaged. Cindy, you eliciting a lot of good questions, which is awesome. Cindy Manuel asks or says, thank you for your insight. We know that strong sponsorship is the #1 indicator of success and change, and you are clearly a model leader and sponsor. We wish we could clone you in all projects. Well said. I totally agree. With that said, any silver bullets on how best to build a coalition with leaders who may have their own agendas?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think because you really want the sponsor to help you build that coalition, right? But the sponsor needs to know from the project manager where are the most important or critical areas in that sponsor coalition. And sometimes maybe the manager who's the most resistant is probably the most important person in the coalition. I think as a project manager, the most important thing you can do for your sponsor is to spend time with them talking about the coalition, right? In that ABC model. If you need your sponsor to help you form that coalition, and you're going to be needing to form that coalition at various levels of your organization, top or down, my sense is you have to get together and brainstorm who that coalition needs to be. But it doesn't mean the sponsor has to be the one. Maybe they're the one who has to bring the meeting together to bring them all together, but there are multiple ways to tap those people that you need as a sponsor coalition. It might be you need to take them to lunch. It might mean that you need to identify a meeting where you talk about a particular issue. It might mean that you need to create a structure that explains why this sponsor coalition is important and what this sponsor coalition is going to do. I think there's lots and lots of different creative ways to build that sponsor coalition. But it is not a one size fits all. I think it's going to be different every single time.
Go ahead.
And it changes, right? Your coalition might need to change based on where you're at in the project.
Relationships, definitely. I would invite anybody who has not asked a question, but something's tickling their brain to either type it in or unmute themselves. Oh, Kenneth Lewis popped up. I read once that if your executive leaders are not change agents, then either stop trying to drive change until you are in a position to influence your change, such as promote it, or go find a company that aligns with you as a person wanting to drive change.
I love that, Kenneth. What a great question. So I spent, in my career, I spent literally 30 years within the blues. And the majority of that was at Anthem. And there were many times when I had to give up pushing a boulder up a hill. And then I'm also pretty persistent and stubborn and resilient. And so that's why I didn't leave Anthem after, so many years. It took a lot for me to finally say, okay, I'm going to go try to do something else in a different sized organization. But there were many times when I would just decide to go into a different organization within Anthem, or I took a different job. But I always tried to control what I could control. So while I couldn't always influence IT when I wasn't getting what I needed from a change or a conversion perspective or a system perspective, what I could do was work with the folks that reported up to me and say, okay, what is in our control? What can we change? How do we pick the most important thing? Who do we need to go and influence? I do think you can influence up a lot in an organization, but if you try and you continue to fail, it probably is time to find a different organization with a culture that mirrors yours in terms of your desire to make change. I'll tell you this one really funny story because I think it does speak to being creative. So the new chief information officer started for Anthem, which was a big company. This was like maybe 7 years ago. And we had gone through some horrible issues with coding that had caused major errors that had to be adjusted, and relationships had to be managed with national customers because we had to pay a lot of money back and we had to adjust a lot of claims. It was just a really messy problem that was caused by this coding error that was controlled and managed within the information technology. So the new CIO started, and he happened to be in the same city as I was in. And I scheduled a meeting with him because I was just coming off sponsoring this project where we had to fix this big problem. And I went and bought him The Emperor Has No Clothes, the storybook. I bought him a children's book of the story of The Emperor Has No Clothes. And you all know that story, right? And I took it to him in my first meeting and I said, I have a gift for you. And I gave it to him and he had a really odd look on his face. And I said, there are a number of problems and challenges, I believe, inside your organization, our organization. And I am your business partner. But as a new person, it's going to be really important that you're willing to look and see what's really going on. We had a great conversation. We talked about this particular project. We made great progress. Things got much better. This is 7 years ago. Someone a few years ago told me that he still had that book on his coffee table.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right? And I didn't mean it in a mean way. I didn't want to be pointing fingers. I simply wanted him to always remember when people are painting you a really rosy picture, you probably want to make sure that, that they're telling you the truth.
Yeah.
So be courageous, be bold, and tell the CEO what she or he needs to hear, not what you think she wants to hear.
Helen, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we can all just give you a big round of applause.
Yay.
I think this is, been one of the best talks that we've had and just really, really helpful. I just wanted to say thank you. I know how busy you are. We all know how busy you are when you showed us all the projects and the changes that you have going on. I'm really glad that we have this recorded because I think it's going to be worthwhile just listening again and sharing this knowledge. So we will be putting this out, a link to this on our website. We have a few more programming things coming up in November. We have another speaker, Chantal Perrat. She's apparently excellent. She's going to be talking about leading change with personal authenticity. That's on the 12th of November. And then we've got some great speakers coming up, starting to book up for January and February. So if you know of other speakers that you think would be excellent, I think I'd love to get a mix of industry speakers like Helen. These are always such valuable insights for us. Then just reach out to us as well. So we wanted to thank you so much. And then the last point is our chapter is growing. We've got a lot of things going on. We would love to have you get involved as a member or joining a committee. So yeah, reach out to us. And once again, just wanted to thank you, Helen, for giving up your time and sharing such amazing insights with us. You can just tell you've got your 10,000 hours and this has been phenomenal with all the tips that we've got. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. It was great to be a part of your class. Erin, great to see you. It's fun to see folks I know out there in the world of change management, and keep doing the good work. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.